please join me again in welcoming Nina Campbell, Will Fisher, and Hada Bing.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good evening, everybody. It's an extraordinary moment in time for the antique and decorating world, as Robert's collection comes up for sale in just a few weeks' time, over 3 days, and it will be a huge sale, and there is already an enormous buzz about it. It's a huge privilege to be here tonight, sitting here talking to Will and Nina, just a year after Robert sadly died, and to be talking about Robert and what makes his collection and every room really that he touched so special. One of the things that struck me when I visited Robert's flat very soon after he died was the conkers on a leaf on the hall table, perfectly arranged alongside other things of much more value. And Robert had given them a place in his world with things, and he'd given them a place in the world and treated them in the same way as he would something of much more value, whether that's through financial value or historical significance. And to me, that sort of sums up a lot about Robert and his approach and his kind of way of being. Everything in Robert's flat and his house at La Gonette, which you will see pictures of in France and which also forms part of the sale, had a reason to be there. Whether it was the sort of really very ugly bazaar that we will talk about, no doubt, in due course, of which is a picture here, to the wonderful carpets, every picture, they all had a reason to be there. And I suppose our aim this evening is to get to grips with what singled Robert out as a dealer, a decorator, and a collector, and discuss his extraordinary eye for seeking out beauty, and as he called it, arranging it. Scrolling behind us, there is Will and Robert as this, I'm going to talk more generally, but just while it's there, is Robert and Will when that mirror was installed, which he bought from Jam, one of the last pieces that he bought. But scrolling, as it goes through, and it will just keep on scrolling, of pictures of his flat in Warwick Square, taken by Simon Upton, and there are pictures from La Garnette, from other houses, and from some from his projects, all of which featured in his book that was published in 2015. And I'm very grateful to Simon Upton, Tessa Traeger, and Christopher Simon-Sykes for lending us these images. So, I think before we go too much kind of deeper into the collection and his work, I think it would be good to sort of place him in his world, and then he would hate the word tastemakers, I imagine, but for want of a better word, where he fits in the sort of line of tastemakers. And Nina, you kind of, were on Pimlico Road. I can't remember when your first shop was on Pimlico
1970.
Road. Yeah. So you've seen it, and could you put it in a context?
I think it's so right that he was on the Pimlico Road, actually, because if you go back, I mean, when I moved into 64 Pimlico Road, where I started, I had this Nina Campbell and Mark Burley, and it was across the zebra crossing from Benison. And so that was very much my early life. And then as I came back to Pimlico Road, there was Robert.
You know, I don't know why, but in my mind, I imagine sort of pre-Geoffrey, you've got John Fowler, obviously, who's the sort of the figure in the doyen of the beginnings.
Yes, but he was a decorator, whereas Geoffrey was really what Robert was basically a dealer, and he didn't care what he bought. He went for the kill. I mean, he wanted to buy what he wanted to have around him.
But they very much changed the language.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you go from this very sort of staid world, in a way, of English brown furniture dealers, and you suddenly go into this dynamic, exciting world. And you and I were talking, you have to put it in the context that there were, this is a golden age of antique dealing. Things are coming out of every corner of every attic, every stable. And it's a world, again, years before the internet. People are getting in there Volvos, and you had to have a Volvo to be an antique dealer estate, and you'd get in it, and you would bloody well drive to the sale, and you'd view the whole sale, and then everyone would fight for the contents. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, Geoffrey broke the rule book, but then the baton was passed, and it's Robert who takes the baton and becomes the principal person of the English country house.
Yes.
And he
Or
does
of
it
their version
of their version, because
Yes.
everyone, as it's passed, as the baton is passed, it's distilled and distilled, and whatever your esoteric interest is, be it, brown furniture, or be it, taxidermy, or with Robert, a lot more sort of highly, more interesting
Well,
articles.
he loved going to Cairo and shopping and that sort of thing, didn't he? I mean,
Which we'll come on to in a minute. Yeah, I mean, his flat is not filled with sort of conventional pieces of brown furniture, is it? Really is.
But what it is filled with are things and objects that you simply, even if you wanted today, you could not go and amass this collection.
No.
This is the halcyon days of the period that he's taken it to the most beautiful place it could be taken.
Yeah. And it's just had such integrity. There's no sense of fashion or time, I suppose.
And that's
I think
what
that's
I
the
love.
point. It's fashionless.
Yeah.
And it's not, there's no trend. None of those things that we all sort of hate, that people sort of want to know. The next colour, I don't think he'd have cared less.
He didn't want to be called as a decorator. He wanted to be, he sort of talked to himself as an arranger.
Yes, and I think he
say?
was an arranger, yes.
I always imagine that it's almost like Robert with an orchestra. He's there, or the perfect dinner party. He sort of arranges his objects in an unlikely way with unlikely bedfellows. But
Well, that's always the best party.
But they work brilliantly.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, thinking about, his paintings that are 20th century modern, but next to a 16th century something or the other.
But that's how it should be, isn't it, really?
No, absolutely.
Of a true collector.
Hannah, when I was in it, she talked about the pieces as sort of family friends. This sale is the family friends in a way, and they really are the pieces that travelled through his life, and you can see it like that picture that the portrait at the back. You see it in lots and lots.
He was one of Robert's favourites.
Yes, he was.
Again, so he was in an illegitimate from a noble father, and the mother had been cuckolded. And again, a perfect Robert story. There's all the symbolism in it. It's almost, for me, as if he was rejected by society, but adopted by Robert. And once Robert had sort of there, and Hannah talks about communicating with his objects, you can imagine how he and this chap went through life together, and he never let him go.
Yeah. Yeah, he
But
became
it's
part of his
extremely
family.
scholarly to have known about that. When you see that picture in a sort of back room of some dingy antique shop, and nobody's loved it, and it was probably dirty, but he knew with all those signs, and that's what's so fascinating about his deep knowledge. I think.
In the antique trade, you get many people, who either deal on their gut or they deal on their academic knowledge. And the funny thing is, you can have people with extraordinary academic knowledge, but they don't know if the thing is real or not. They could write 52 books about it, because on the face of it, it appears to be real, but it may not be. Robert is one of those rare individuals that manages to fuse both academic rigor with actually true understanding.
Nina, are there pieces that in this sale, without wanting to give away what you might be bidding on, that you particularly sort of
I know what I want desperately, but I can't have it because it's too big. I'd have to move house. Is the dog picture, because I love the fact that some rich man has bought this fancy house, which is way in the back on his property, but all he really cares about, couldn't give a monkey's about his wife, children, and illegitimates, and whoever else. And he's got 9 dogs in the front. And it's just magic, I think. And the fact that you walked in and saw that was the picture in front was...
And I love that the scale of it's all wrong, and it's
completely.
super naive.
The house is a quarter the size of the dog.
Sort of secondary,
Totally. Yeah. And it was the first thing that when you went into the house, that's what you saw. So that would be my purchase.
Will, I just wanted to how important is the provenance, that the fact that these pieces have passed through Robert's hands, have been part of this collection, to their value, do you think?
I think that if you put it in the context that here is a man who is the most erudite of all collectors, who's had the opportunity to buy anything he likes in a world that we talked about, when there are a plethora of incredible goods. He has chosen these. You know, it's not that one.
No.
It's that one, and it's that specific. He's also edited and edited. So this really is a distilled collection, the like of which comes on the market. You know, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact, for me, in many ways, Robert is almost like another Sir John Soane. He is a true collector of integrity. And if people are successful in buying, it's absolutely imperative that they keep the facts. You know, it's like the bazaar, keeping the story going. Yeah. And also, I implore everyone, if you are successful in buying, do not restore anything.
Yes, quite right.
There you go. That is a good tip. Well, I mean, as we get, I just wanted to, you know, it is sort of sad to think that this flat no longer exists in this form. Now that there are pieces already on show in Pall Mall, but it couldn't have lasted. It couldn't have been a museum. And you sort of, from all that we've been talking about, you sort of understand that Robert would have seen this as just a chapter in their lives. He was the next handprint. Custodian. And also he would have loved this sale, and he is going to be an extraordinary sale, as befits, I think.
Absolutely.
An extraordinary eye.
And the most beautiful catalogue, which I have to say, Druids have done.
No, you said it. It's much better coming from you.
Right, no, I don't do that. No, but I think in a world now where auction rooms are not going to paper, where everything is going online, it is only befitting that this catalogue is handled in this way. And I have to say, this isn't a shameless, I have no reason to say this, but it is so befitting for this man that such a beautiful, seamlessly amazing bit of paper. Again, catalogues. You need to get a catalogue, and you need to treasure it and keep it for the rest of your life. If you get nothing, get a catalogue.
It'll be a collector's item in its own way.
Absolutely.
Thanks to the audience. Thank you all for coming this evening. And we hope you join us downstairs for a drink. And please join me again in thanking Hannah, Will, and Nina for a fabulous time.